Okay, awesome. Now I have to do the thing where I go and paste this link into my profile. So give me a second to do that. All right. Anybody here? No one's here yet. That's all good. Sort of expecting. It's fun seeing myself do this. Now I copy the link. Okay. We've got some people with us. That's cool. Thank you. All right. And we had a little rebrand today on the Gene-Sis page. Okay. It doesn't look so nice when I'm leaning over and you can't see me. So I'm sorry about that. Okay. So we had a little rebrand today on the Gene-Sis page, which is very exciting. Some nice new images to keep you entertained. All right, so good evening, good afternoon, good morning. If you're in Jerusalem like I am, it's just gone witching hour. If you're in Australia, good morning. If you're in New York, I hope you had a fabulous day and now you're clocking off and you can have a nice cup of tea. L'chaim. And if you're in the West Coast or Central or anywhere else, I hope that you are still plugging through your day. So with all the greetings said, I'm still not comfortable with this live stream format, but if anything, this is the time where we all have to just get over our challenges. First and foremost, I want to say that this little gathering this evening, this teaching that I'm going to be offering you is really focusing on Earth Day, but I want to first and foremost put out here that I've just lit a candle for Yom HaShoah, for the Holocaust Remembrance Day, which begins this evening here in Jerusalem and tomorrow. It's interesting because usually it's a very definitive moment. Usually, restaurants are closed and there's a lot of commemorative events around town. And tonight things have been sort of quiet, as things always are in a way these days. So let me just shake that all off. It's always awkward starting off these live streams and getting everything set up, and then you're like, okay, what happens now? What happens now is we can talk some Torah. Okay, so I want to say first and foremost, thank you to Chazan, the Lab for Jewish Sustainability, who have been doing really incredible work the last, I'm going to say 10 years. I think they've been around for about that long, maybe a little longer, in really helping us define and hone the different areas where the Jewish community is working collectively on areas of environmental justice and food justice and climate change and all of the things that we sort of put in the back of our heads, like that's a good thing to do. Yeah, one day I'm going to be focused on that. And we're running out of time. This is something that we need to be focusing on right now. I'm really, really blessed that I've been working with Chazan the last few years, teaching over Pesach at Isabella Friedman Retreat Center. And that would be one of the places where I think I had some of my really formative experiences as an adult thinking about this. So when I was a child, I grew up in Australia. Australia is a wonderful country where everybody wheels out their bins on a Tuesday night and puts them, you try to say people put them neatly outside in front of their house, but there's always some neighbor who gets in the way of the driveway. But mostly we're pretty good. We separate the trash and we separate the recycling. And now we even have green bins where we put the compost. And I remember when I was very small, I must have been, I never went to second grade. Must have been third or fourth grade. And we went to a school that had been closed down. They called it a ghost school. And it was used for education. And some teachers, they were very fun and cute and cool, and they did all kinds of things with puppets and costumes, and they taught us about, back then, what was called the 3 R's: reduce, recycle. And they taught us all about how to make compost and how to make I remember learning the word detritus from them, the way that compost breaks down, and different things about recycling and how to reuse. And it was all very inspiring. And I think I went through the next 15 to 20 years after that, always talking about, oh yeah, we should do this because it's good for the environment. This is good for the environment. I sort of, was the one who joked that, I always had to put things in recycling when I went to families in New York who would just sort of, people who would throw all the bottles in the trash. And I was like, no, this is a thing that I do. I recycle. And then one day everything sort of hit me all at once. And I realized that, as we say it says in the Mishnah, it says that the great sage Hillel, who I'm going to mention in a minute again, he would say, Im einani li, mi li. If I am not for myself, who's going to be for me? If I don't show up and stand up for myself, who I am and what I need, who's going to actually show up for me? Uchsha'ani lo atzmi ma'ani. But if I am not going to stand up for myself and be there for myself and do the best I can, then what am I? I need to also, be able to do that for myself. Otherwise, I'm nothing. And im la achshav ematai. This is one of the most famous Jewish quotes. Im la achshav ematai. If not now, when? And we've been hearing, that scientists talk about the doomsday clock being, 5 minutes to midnight. And we've been hearing all of these things, and we've been paying attention to science. But today I want us to zoom really, really far out. And, unfortunately, we live in a world where talk about climate change, talk about the earth, talk about the environment has become very politicized. And I think that if we, that was a very American accent of me. And I think that if we pull all the way back and let's look at this from our tradition, let's look at this from a Jewish perspective and also from a perspective of Jewish mysticism. One of the things that I often think is that the Jewish mystics, who were passing down traditions for a lot longer than we actually have anything recorded. Kabbalah literally means receive tradition. So, there's a lot of stuff that wasn't written down. But in the more recent years, in the texts that I've been studying in Chassidut, which were really about taking that mystic tradition and applying it, I often say that there are things that were written in there that are sort of like Easter eggs that were implanted within these texts and within these ideas, waiting for us to come and find them, waiting for us to, as we go through our life in the world, find those moments where we say, oh, this is what they were talking about. This is what's happening right now. But let's move all the way back. One of my favorite texts in the Tanakh, in the Hebrew Bible, is the Song of Songs, Shir Shirim, which just this past week, it was the last few days of Pesach, of Passover, and it was actually read aloud in the synagogue. There was no synagogue, but it is the tradition on that day to be read, and a lot of people, I'm sure, read it at home. Song of Songs is one of the most beautiful books ever written, in my opinion. It might be the most beautiful book of poetry ever written, in my opinion. It is an incredible love song, and it is a love song that describes two lovers, the lover and the beloved, as we say in Hebrew, the dod and the ra'aya. One is a feminine archetype, one is a masculine archetype, and they are just having the most incredible romance here in the hills of Jerusalem, not too far from where I am, where they wake up in the morning and they smell the flowers and they see the flocks go grazing, and they run through the hills at night, and they build themselves little, they notice that they build themselves little shelters around the vineyards, depending on what's being harvested at the time. And they spend a lot of time talking about the weather change, and it seems like their love, their relationship is mimicked by the weather change. Like, there are buds in the earth, and suddenly there's the beginnings of spring, and we can hear the sound of the dove. And there are moments when, it's the heat of the summer and the heat of the passion flames up. And it is filled with the most incredible descriptions of the flora and fauna of the land, the Holy Land of Israel, of these descriptions of these beautiful vistas of mountains and of the plains and the different types of flowers. I mean, just the description of like the lily of the Sharon versus the roses. And there's just so many incredible descriptions of nature. And biblical scholars will say that that's because these were actually poems that were, quite popular in the ancient land of Israel. And these poems, sort of got put together into a book. But what made this book sacred? What made it canonized? What makes it part of our Tanakh? That's the fact that this book is actually an allegory of a divine love song. It's a love song between human beings and God. It's a way of describing the way that we relate to that constant chase, that constant give and take between our relationship with the divine, with the holiness, with the wow, with the transcendent, with the radical amazement, and our relationship with going about our lives and dealing with the challenges of day to day. And, it can also be, our national, as the Jewish people, our national story of running and returning and being in connection with God and having a temple and having a national identity, and then, being spread out all over the world and constantly persecuted. And there's just a lot of richness in the way that this describes relationship, because it's not all healthy. I remember after I started reading Song of Songs a bunch of times, I was like, oh my God, this story has all kinds of really toxic, abusive patterns in it. It has the lover in the middle of the night, she wakes up and she says, where's my beloved? Where's my beloved? I can't find him. And then she can't find him anywhere, so she goes to bed, and then suddenly he knocks on her door and she's like, dude, I washed my feet, I washed my clothes, I'm out, like, sorry. And then suddenly she sees his hand and she's like, okay. And she gets up to open the door and he's gone. And it's just like one of those incredibly tense theatrical moments. And that experience, that tension, is something that there's a reason why that's played out in the background of nature. Why are we talking about specifically all of this happening in nature? And when we reread all of this with a mystical lens, there's a lot for us to learn from the interplay between a relationship, a loving and also sometimes really challenging relationship, also human relationship with the divine, and our relationship with the earth, with the planet. So, starting from the very beginning, a very good place to start, in Bereshit, in Genesis, we're told that God creates this garden and gives it to the people, la'avda or l'shamra, to work it and to protect it. We as humans, it says that in the beginning there was nothing growing in the garden because there was no person, no human there to till the field. The relationship of earth and human is intertwined from the beginning. Human, Adam, comes from Adama. We have the creation story in chapter 2 in Parak Bet of Bereshit, is that there is this Adama, Adam, there is the earth. God takes the earth, forms the human, and then of course forms the human partner, the woman, out of the side. And there's a really incredible understanding that we have an explanation about what's the relationship of humans and divine and earth. So Adam is the earth. Adam is literally, Adam doesn't mean man, Adam means earthling. I often translate it as earthling when I'm writing translations. And Adam has inside him, vayipach ba'apav, God breathes into the Adam's nostrils the breath of God. And that's what starts to operate the human, the earthling, as we might call it. And then we have from the Adam, so the Adam is a process of connecting the divine energy and the very physical earth-based energy. And through that, we have the perfect human. Now, Chava, who is the helpmate, the female who was created from the side, is actually taken from the flesh of Adam. And I just read this explanation. It's so beautiful. It says that Chava, which also means life, she's the mother of life, she is the next level. She's the next level amalgamation of body and spirit, or God's breath and the earth, because Adam had to actually do that work, Adam's self, of combining the earth and the breath of God. And Chava was made that way. She was born with that tension already reconciled within her. She was already a combination of both earth and God. And that's what we're working towards in the world. We're working towards being able to live in a way that is earth and God. So we were given this garden, and we're told la'avda l'shamra, to work the land and to protect the land. And the time period, the setting, when we look at something like Shir Shirim, at this incredible idyllic pastoral tale of apples and apple trees and pomegranates and lilies of the valley and flocks streaming down mountains and little buds and all these beautiful images. We're really seeing an ideal world, and we're seeing a world where our behavior is mimicking nature. Like I said, when it's spring, the love blossoms, things like that. And it can teach us a lot about how we actually can connect to the divine, and how our relationship with the earth is not is not unlike that lover relationship of Shir Hashirim, and also our relationship to God. Because with the earth, we also go through periods where we're living in harmony with the earth. There are different traditions, different indigenous cultures who lived in harmony with the earth for generations and generations, and they knew exactly what to utilize. They knew exactly where their resources were. They knew where the water was. They knew where when the rains would come. They knew when the snows would come. They knew where when the animals were coming, and they knew when it was going to be where the animals were migrating to. They knew how to work with their resources so that they knew when the burns were coming. My accent. They knew when to burn off the land. They knew, and they could be in harmony with that. And then there are times when we sort of romanticized, oh, these people totally understood the earth, and maybe they didn't always. Maybe not every single thing has always been perfect, whether you're looking at African tribal history or Australian tribal history or Native American indigenous histories, or the Native Judean, our people, the Jewish people's history. It's, there's always been tension, there's always been struggle, but overall we've had time periods when we've lived, as it says, the idyllic period in this land was ish tachat gafnot achatenato, every person under their vine and under their fig tree, which is just, a moment where you have the time to rest, you have the time to play, you can enjoy luxurious, delicious fruits, you have the shade. It's a dream. And then we also have times and now might be one of them, where we're not living in harmony with nature, and we're not aware of our resources. We're not aware of where they're coming from, what we're supposed to do to take utmost care of them. And everything that we do, we don't pay attention. We're not living in total awareness, because we don't even know the extent of everything that comes from, of everything that we engage with, where it comes from, and what its impact is. So I'm a little bit obsessed with reading books about histories of interesting things. And I read a book a couple of years ago that I absolutely love. It's called Bananas. It's about the banana, the history of the banana, and talks all about something really interesting that most people don't know about the banana, which is that the banana is a cloned species, that we only have one type of banana that we eat. It's called the Cavendish. There was another kind that we had up until the 60s called the Gros Michel. And that banana is pretty much identical in form and shape to any other banana that has existed at any point in time, because the banana does not reproduce sexually. It reproduces by taking cuttings. Farmers will take cuttings and cultivate and grow them. And that means that the bananas, they're all genetically identical, and they also are all very scarily at risk of disease, because they don't have any sort of genetic mutation that can help one be stronger than the other. It's a really incredible thing to start thinking about bananas, and I read this entire book over the period of a month or so, and to start learning that, like, the term banana republic comes because entire empires, entire kingdoms, entire countries were created or destroyed around bananas. And certain South American places where they were building banana plantations, that's where they created these little puppet governments, which were called banana republics, and they created railway tracks and post offices, and everything was based just around people like us having bananas in our cereal in the morning. Bananas are just one little piece of something that, what do? I go down the street. Thank God I'm very blessed. I have supermarkets near me, and I get the bananas, and I don't need to worry. Last week, I was dealing with eggs. There was an egg shortage here in Israel, and I couldn't just go down the street and get my eggs. But aside from my banana book, which is now it's in New York still, the last few weeks I've been reading a very similar book, which is even scarier, and I highly recommend it. It's called Confessions of an Eco-Sinner. And this gentleman, Fred Pierce, he did this about 12 years ago, so things have changed since. He went to He went all over the world following things that he had. He wanted to know where his socks came from. He wanted to know where his coffee came from. He wanted to know where his gold wedding ring came from. He wanted to know where his aluminium cans came from. He wanted to know where his computer and cell phone came from. And he also wanted to know where they went. What's the downstream? Where does his trash go when he throws it out in his rubbish bin in central London? Where does his son's phone go when he wants to recycle it or get it refurbished? And he goes to Tanzania, and he goes to Bangladesh, and he goes to South Africa, and he goes to Colombia, and he goes to all these different places to see. And he goes and he sees the people who farm the tiger shrimp in these pools in Bangladesh and lose a lot of money because everything has to go through middlemen. Excuse me. He goes down into a gold mine in Johannesburg, and he sees how much rock is required just to extract the amount of gold that's in his very cheap, very basic 50-pound wedding ring. He goes to China and to India, and he meets women who work in factories who sew the shirts and the collars and the socks that he wears. He goes to Tanzania, and he sees where young children are manually dunking old circuit boards into acid to extract the copper from the circuit boards. And he starts talking about metals and where metals come from, and the idea that today's contemporary cell phones and computers have such complex variety of metals that are used to put them together that there are predictions of running out of these different metals throughout in the upcoming years, because there's so much ore that needs to be extracted in order to get these. I can't even name them. I can't name them, but there are all these different metals that you wouldn't know about. Like, one of them is very specific. It's very soft. It makes LED screens. And one of them is replacement for silicon chips. And it just goes on and on. And if you read a book like this, and I don't read it all at once, it's like, when you have a book that you just read for like 10 minutes here and there. It would have been my bus book if I was still, taking public transport right now. And it starts to make you think a lot about how am I living? And what am I taking from this earth, and what am I giving back to it? And so part of Shir Shirim, just to keep sort of counterbalancing them, is that Shir Shirim shows us what it is to live in complete awareness of the earth and the environment around us. To know that, what do you mean you can't eat pomegranates now? It's not pomegranate season. What do you mean you can't sleep outside now? It's not that season. Actually, I think as of last night, it's now sleeping outside season in Jerusalem. And to start thinking about where does my stuff come from, makes me think, well, my cup of tea has in it, chamomile, and where were those flowers grown, and who dried those flowers, and who packaged them into a tea bag, and then who packaged them into a box, and then who stacked them onto the shelves, and so that I could then buy them in a supermarket here in Jerusalem. And it just boggles our minds when we start to think about it. We're living in a moment where we actually can think about it. We've stepped into a moment where we're not just doing things blindly because that's the way we've always done things. We actually are able to say, hey, how do I get up in the morning? How do I go about my day? And sometimes we're absolutely overwhelmed because we have financial pressures that we didn't have before. A lot of us have lost our income. A lot of us have lost the stability of knowing what's happening in the future. Many of us are overwhelmed taking care of family members, of children, of parenting, of taking care of sick family members, of taking care of our own parents and grandparents. And on one hand, we're overwhelmed, but on the other hand, we're more intentional because we're not just getting into the subway or getting to our cars and commuting and going to work. Another one of the books that I read recently was actually a discussion by, I've been reading a lot as it's that time of year, by Howard Schultz, who's the CEO of Starbucks. He was actually the founder of Starbucks. He left as CEO and came back in 2008. And part of the reason he came back is because he wanted to revitalize it. And he talks a lot about what he sees as, how to engage people to do a turnaround and to make innovation happen. And I've been thinking a lot about this because we're here in this moment where it's Yom HaShoah, we are commemorating the most horrifying destruction of all time. And in a couple days, we're also marking Earth Day, where we are doing the best we can to avoid even further horrible destruction. And we're also living where we open up a newspaper, or who opens up a newspaper anymore? Who am I kidding? We open up our phones, we open up the computer, the internet, and all we see is destruction everywhere. And it's in, like God forbid, lahavdil al not to compare, but before a crash or something scary happens, everything moves in slow motion. We're in that moment where everything's moving in slow motion. So we're prioritizing things that we weren't prioritizing before, because we realize that it's important to think about our families and our health more than it is to think about, running off to do this next thing and running off to do this next thing. So we actually have this amazing gift of a moment in time. We can think about, where is everything coming from? So I want to come back to Shir Shirim, and I want us to go a little bit more mystical. So one of the most beautiful lines in Shir Shirim, I was just studying this today, is Bati legani achoti kala. I have come into the garden, my sister, my bride. Bati legani, I have entered, I have come. Legani, gan, garden, to my garden. And achoti, my sister, kala, the bride. And ancient Israel romantic poetry, when you call someone your sister, she's actually like maybe not really so much your sister, you know what I'm saying? And there is such a deep, this is actually one of those real sweet moments of when they sort of like, they kind of come together, and it's like beautiful. So what's really happening here? So one of my favorite Hasidic teachings of all time comes from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe actually started off this teaching, and then the most recent Lubavitcher Rebbe took it into a lot of detail. 40 years of his life, he would do another explanation about this. He said, what is Bati Lagani Echati Kala, or as we say, Basi Lagani Echati Kala? What does it mean? I have come into the garden, my sister, my bride. Who is the garden and who is the sister? The garden is the world that we live in. The garden is, we started off in Gan Eden. We were created within a Gan of Da'al Shamra to take care of it. And who's entering the garden? Entering into the garden is the divine presence. Entering into the garden is the Shechinah, coming to connect with us, to be in relationship with us humans, to be with the beloved. And when God says, or when the Shechinah says, Bati legani achati kala, I'm here, I'm present, we're talking about a moment where we're able to actually see that the divine is manifest and present in every single thing that we're experiencing around us. Now, for a long time, we haven't been able to experience that, connect that sense of the divine. In this Hasidic teaching, we learn that there were different processes throughout history when the garden, the human world that we've been living in, has been not in alignment with the divine, and the world that we're living in has been sort of not a garden for God, let's just call it. And then there have been moments when certain people who've come into our history, who've been living with consciousness and living with as leaders, with a relationship with God and a relationship with the divine, and who've been able to bring, as it says, bring the Shechinah, bring the divine presence back to earth. The idea of Basi Lagani is that God did not create a world in order for God to be something that is in the heavens. One of the most powerful opportunities that we have in the world today and in general is to create an alignment, to create a fusion, to give the divine an opportunity to be manifest and present here in the world. Now, you could say about anything in nature, oh my God, of course we know that that's divine. I go for a hike and I look at a waterfall and I'm like staring at God's face. It's the most amazing thing in the world. And of course I know about the divine, because when I went, out to South America or out to India, and I just felt so connected to God all the time. I was meditating 5 hours a day. Yeah, that's a way of experiencing God. But the real way that we can do the work that we're here to do, and do what we call like the real work, that's about saying, I can see God, I can see the divine in everything I do, in everywhere I go, in everything that I'm experiencing. And when we think about how we see nature, you can imagine that there's a level between being in South America, or being on a hike in the country, let's say, where you can see Earth everywhere, you can see its beauty, and then maybe being in a place like a suburban place where, you know, you have plenty of trees, but you also have, you know, paved roads, and you also have a sidewalk, but you have a lot of trees and a lot of big yards. And then you might come to like a more inner suburban area, like where I grew up, where everyone has a nature strip with a bit of grass out front, and everyone has a nice garden. And then you end up in a really urban area where all you have is the concrete sidewalks, and through the concrete, you can sometimes see little cracks of green coming through. You can see these little bits of like, there's nature making herself known. There is God showing God's face to me. Maybe there are these little community gardens. And when we understand that the world we live in is always like that, even when we're in those urban spaces and when everything's concrete, or if we're out in the middle of like the most beautiful place on earth and we still don't feel the divine, that we always have that option. We always have that ability to fuse heaven and earth, shamayim and aretz. And that's what our role is in Basi Lagani, in coming into the garden and saying, God, I want there to be a way that you, the divine, the most source, expansive energy that exists on the planet, can actually exist on this planet alongside me. And the way I do that is through my consciousness and my awareness and my embodied actions. It's not just about meditating and praying. It's about actually creating a space. Creating a space, we just read in the Torah portions about a month or so ago about building a sanctuary. This week, the portion is all about, dedicating a sanctuary, a space for God, a mishkan. And what's the Mishkan? The Mishkan is literally, the root word of it is shachan, to live, to dwell. God says, "V'shachanti b'tocham," and I will dwell in them. And the Midrash tells us that that God had a desire to hang out right here and have a cup of tea with me and live here in this world. What does that mean? It means that every single thing that's been created on this planet was made in some way so that we can use it as a way of connecting to the divine in its own form, which means you don't have to quit your job and go off to the hilltops to meditate. We can actually take what we have here in front of us and make that a vehicle for connection to the divine. One of the ways we can do that is by being more connecting to nature more, and there's all kinds of studies on the benefits that it does to humans to be in alignment with nature. But another way of doing that is finding ways to take every single thing we do and do that with a consciousness of the divine, and making space for that connection to nature, even if we're not at all there. An example might be like right now with COVID-19 and with quarantine. Usually I like to go out for walks and sit with trees a lot. Haven't been able to do that. So even just for a few minutes every day, I try to go and just like even touch a tree trunk or put my bare feet on the ground for just a minute. It does something, it activates us. There's something about being able to say, every relationship that I'm building with the divine is one that I want to be a sustainable relationship, a long-term relationship. That means that everything that I do, all of the channels that I create in my life, like the rituals of what I do in the morning, the way I go about things, how I cook my dinner, and how I go to bed, and how I do my laundry, can all be vehicles for the divine. Here's the thing about Judaism that's like kind of crazy. We haven't thought about it. A lot of us went, oh yeah, like Judaism, like we're the people of the book. I actually just read something recently about before the state of Israel was founded, there was a discussion in the newspaper about what the name of the new country should be. And someone said, you can't call it Eretz. There was a discussion about calling it just like Eretz or Aretz, land, earth. Because we're not the people Am Ha'aretz, we're Am HaSefer. We're not the people of the earth, we're the people of the book. In the Talmud, which is where a lot of like the rabbinic Judaism ideas were formed, the Am Ha'aretz, the people who worked the land, they were not the cool ones. They were like the poor, ignorant people who didn't really know as much as these lofty rabbis did. And they were called Am Ha'aretz. But, throughout time, we've become Am HaSefer. But I want to say that this might have a little bit to do with like American Protestant culture, that we're not just Am HaSefer. We're also Am HaGuf. We're the people of the body. And that body is our physical body, and it's the body of the earth. We are the people who have rituals, festivals that are totally in line with nature. Like I said about Shir Shirim, we just celebrated Pesach, Passover. It comes from the springtime. It's the barley harvest. It's the new lambs. We're coming in a few weeks to Shavuot, which is coming towards the wheat harvest and the first fruits of the season. We then move towards Sukkot, which is about celebrating the gathering, the cornucopia of all the feasting that we do in the fall when we've had a really good harvest, and then we start praying for the winter rains. We just started saying the prayer for dew last week on Pesach because this is the time when everything's being planted and we want everything to be nice and tight, beautiful in the soil so things can come up. This is how we live our lives, and this is how we've always lived our lives. Everything is intentional, and everything is about being in deep awareness of the earth around us, of the climates, of the seasons, of the terrain, of how the food that comes from the earth sustains and nourishes us, of how the cycles of the seasons, including the Shemitah season, the 7th year when things lie fallow, and the 7th day when we rest, how all of that plays into the world around us. This is the kind of people we are, and we do so much with our bodies. Everything that a lot of the Jewish practice is something that requires, what is the food that I'm eating? What is the way that I'm walking down the street? What is the way that I'm giving to the people around me? What is the way that I wrap my arm with straps every day to connect myself in prayer? Put something over here to align myself with the divine. What are the ways that I use my body in a sacred way? In every single way, from immersing it in fresh, clean water, to let go of trauma, to let go of different statuses, to shift who I was and who I'm becoming. All of that is about awareness and connection. And for us to think, okay, like my life is, my Jewish life, my spiritual practice is just about sitting down and, thinking something, writing something, praying something, we're totally losing the point that everything that we do is about engaging with the environment around us. And that means that when it comes time, like right now when we're being called to serve in a big way and to take care of the mother of the environment, just like she's taking care of us, we have to step up. So I want to share another teaching. I have no idea how much time I've got. Well, I can do whatever I want, but I just want to, okay. So I want to talk about something else. In Hebrew, we have different verb forms, and every noun, we have different genders in our nouns. So every noun has its way that it's paired, and there are certain sort of rules around it, and there are some that are the exceptions from the rules. So the word aretz or eretz is a word that is always feminine. It does not end with the classic signifiers of a feminine verb, but it's feminine. Eretz is it's the feminine, it's the mother. And we know that we talk about this all the time. Mother Earth, we talk about the earth. We come from the earth. Now, there have been some teachings that have been very powerful in my life around the idea that maybe because we call earth feminine, we've lived in a society, we've lived in a mindset that has put its focus on the feminine as secondary. The act of nurturing, the act of giving birth, the act of nursing and feeding children, the act of being at home, the act of growing, the act of moving in cycles, all of those elements that have been branded feminine have been seen as secondary in the world that we live in. They've been seen as lesser and not as important as a world of growth and a world of moving forward and a world of being aggressive and a world of being influential. Now, the divine masculine is actually protective and focused and moves forward to get things done and proactive. But we've been living in a world of shadow divine masculine, which means that all of those masculine traits of being decisive and forward moving and protective has become about aggression and about, being overprotective of my territory over your territory. And all that has been the feminine, which includes the earth and includes nature and it includes food and it includes water and it includes health, have been seen as secondary and less important than, conquering new territories and having a lot of guns in an arsenal. It's a lot more, it's a lot sexier to have a really good military presence than to have a lot of ventilators available for your vulnerable people when they get sick, as we've learned the really, really hard way the last few weeks. And we're living in a world that is saying enough is enough. Enough is enough. We need to bring back the feminine consciousness. And bringing back the feminine consciousness means a few things. It means, on an absolutely basic level, to bring women into leadership roles, which a lot of people are working very hard on, but it also means to bring back the consciousness of what does it mean to honor and respect the act of mothering. And men can mother too, it's not gendered, but the act of mothering as nature, as the earth does, of giving and giving with unconditional love, giving her fruit and then always more growing back, of taking everything that's waste and incorporating it into the earth's body through compost and then allowing that to keep regenerating, to operate in cycles, to say sometimes I'm really up and sometimes I'm really down. All of those aspects earth and women have in common. And there are theorists in the ecofeminism community who say that it's very likely that a lot of the challenges of oppression of the earth has come from the same consciousness that oppresses women. Now, there are some people who say that they find that problematic because there are women who've also been very involved in oppressing the earth and in waste and not paying attention. And that's true. But let's step back from if it's men or women and think about the energy. We're living in a world that for a long time has been dominated by a masculine energy of acquire, buy, have, need, want, go, get. And we haven't been living in a world that says be, nurture, grow, feed, love, care, protect, be, breathe. It's been all go, go, go. So it doesn't matter what gender you are. You can be any gender, and we're still under that we've been under that influence. A big part of the ecofeminist tradition is not only to look at the systems and structures and how involving women in environment, or the feminine in environmental decisions, can help communities in the Himalayas and women who create farms and collect water and do all kinds of amazing work, or the Black church community in the South in America who are forming community gardens in food deserts. And, that's where ecofeminism has some incredible, incredible work around, women working with the earth and making social change. But beyond that, it's also a spiritual practice. It's also a spiritual practice of saying, wow, God has no gender. God in Hebrew is gendered masculine. But God, as we know God, and in the mystic tradition, doesn't have a gender. And if we saw God as more feminine, would we honor the earth more? Will we look at those ancient goddess religions that honored the earth and saw that the earth contains within it divine spirit and say, wow, how can I, if I love God, if I love Hashem, if I'm connected to the divine, if I believe in the Torah, how can I not honor and respect the earth? And we have that in our liturgy, in the tefillah every single day, multiple times a day. After the Shema, we say, Vaya im Shama. We say a paragraph that literally says, it's from the Torah, but it's saying, if you listen to me and you will be kind to the poor and you will be living in alignment with God and you will give the corners of your fields to the poor people and let them graze and collect what was left behind in the fields, and you'll honor the Shabbat, the moment when you have to rest off the field and rest the animals. And when you do all of these things that show that I'm going to live in harmony between earth and God, then what's going to happen? You'll reap your grain at a great time, and you'll have plenty of wine and plenty of grain, and everyone will be happy and everything will be magic. And if you don't, the land will expel you. The land will vomit you out. The land will not be able to tolerate people living on it who are not respecting its laws. And it's very much it's an inevitable reflex almost. It's not like this is God punishing you for not honoring the land. It's saying this is how we work with land. When we're humans and we live on a planet, we take care of it. We take care of it by taking care of each other, and we take care of it by taking care of the earth. The minute we don't do that anymore, the land can't handle it. There's an incompatibility there. The land literally expels, vomits, and says, I can't hold you. There's a very disturbing analogy that I've been thinking about for a long time, which is I experienced this when I was looking after a woman. It was a very late night, and there was an event, and there was a woman who earlier in the evening had been dancing. She'd been dancing up on a bar top, and she'd been wearing this like very attractive outfit, and she'd been just like, she looked like the queen of the night. And I found her a few hours later in a restroom, and she was wearing a very tight corset, and she was trying to throw up, and she couldn't, and she was in so much pain. And there was some very aggressive security guards outside, and they said, "We don't care that she's drunk. We don't care that she's in pain. We're just gonna carry her out." And I said, "No. Like, she needs. Give us 5 extra minutes. We'll take care of her. We'll let her finish throwing up. We'll put on her clothes because she wasn't really wearing any clothes, and then we'll help her get a taxi home and take care of her." And there was this moment when these men were just looking at her with complete aggression and complete lack of compassion. And I see this woman on the floor, and I think to myself, this is the Shechinah on the floor in the middle of the bathroom, because she's got lipstick all over her mouth and her hair is everywhere, and she's, got all kinds of bodily fluids coming out of her. And the shadow masculine, that energy that's looking at her like, ugh, who are you? And she's like, you put me here. Your expectations that I dress up a certain way, that I dance a certain way, that I drink a certain amount. She was wearing this very, very uncomfortable high heels and corset. I did all of those for you and what you expect from me in your society. And now that everything's coming out and I'm bleeding and I'm bruised and I'm bloody and I'm throwing up on the floor, now you say this is a problem? And I think about that to do with the earth. I think about how the earth is so beautiful, green and blue and forests and trees and mountains and everything that we can imagine, everything that we need. And we say, oh, earth, you can give us so many beautiful things from inside your belly. Let's plug deep into your belly and your core and take this and take that and dress you up like this and dress you up like that and demand this from you and demand that from you. And we've been doing that to the earth for a long time. We've been mining, we've been fracking, we've been logging, we've been deforesting, we've been doing all of these things, putting her in a closet, feeding her with tequila, and now she's vomiting, and suddenly her inner core is coming out, and we have these oil spills, and we have these earthquakes, and we have these tsunamis, and we have these emissions, and we have these atmosphere, and we have acid rain, we have everything. And we're like, Earth, how could you do this to us? You were that pretty sexy, we had you all dressed up. And she's like, you put me here. You did this to me. You punched my belly. You took what was outside from my guts. And now you're wondering why my guts are hanging out. And that is the same analogy, just like this real life woman who I'm speaking about. And just like this real life earth planet that we live on, that is our relationship with the Shechinah. That is our relationship with the divine. The Shechinah is not the God that we grew up with of like some benevolent, all-knowing, looking over us from above. The Shechinah is the divine presence that is here with us on the earth all the time. And when we go out in the world and we don't recognize that the rocks that we're walking on are divine, we are not bringing in the Shechinah's presence into our lives. When we walk down the earth and we say, I'm drinking this tea that was made by these people and all the different resources to come together and make my tea, and I'm not acknowledging the divine power that brought it to me, and also all the people that brought it to me, we are not honoring the Shechinah. We are not honoring that sense, that force of alignment. And that is what can save us right now. That is where we have hope. That is where, instead of saying, oh my God, we're done for. We're done for because of COVID-19. We're done for because of this economy. We're done for because of technology. We're done for because of climate change. And say, no, yesh tikva. Losing track of time. No one knows what time it is. But a few weeks ago, on Pesach, we read the most incredible prophecy from the prophet Ezekiel, where he's standing in a valley and he sees these dry bones. And God says to him, hey, what do you think about these dry bones, huh? And he's like, yeah, they're pretty dry. And God goes, do you think these bones can live? And he's like, well, only you know, God. I'm not going to say anything. Only you know, God. And God says, prophesy. I want you to prophesy over these bones. And when you prophesy, these bones are going to grow flesh, and they're going to grow sinews, and they're going to grow skin over their sinews, and they're going to come together, and I will blow into them my breath, God's breath, and they will live. And Yechezkel at this point is in the most interesting scenario, because Yechezkel is a human. In fact, of all of the prophets, Ezekiel is the one who is most often called Ben Adam, son of man, son of human. And God is God. God can do anything, but God can't in this scenario. God says, Yechezkel, atatanabe, you prophesy. Your action as the son of man, as Ben Adam, Adam meaning human or earthling, like I said before, only you as an earthling, a human who has God's breath inside you and is also made from earth, only you can create that connection, that amalgamation, that bond between these bones and God who wants to reanimate them. And Yechezkel prophesies, and sure enough, the bones all join each other, like skeleton by skeleton. And as he continues, they grow flesh, and they grow sinews, and they grow skin, and then again, they're still not breathing. And God asks Yechezkel again to prophesy, and God breathes God's breath into them, and suddenly they stand up and they walk. And God says, and at the end of this prophecy, God says, these people said, Avda tikvatenu, our hope is lost. We're done. These bones are too dry. They've been gone for too long. How can we live again? And this was a message to the people who had been exiled from the kingdom of Israel and Judah, the people who had totally thought that was the end of our people, that was the end of our tradition. And the answer was, no. Lo avda tikvatenu, as the Israeli national anthem says. The hope is not lost. These bones can live again. And the way these bones live again is by a combination of human effort and faith in God. It's not one or the other. We can't go about life knowing that the planet is in the state it's in and say, God will help, it's all going to be fine, I'm going to not worry about what the scientists say, because one day everything will be magically changed, because we're moving into a messianic era where everything's going to be different. And we can't walk around the world and say, okay, the science says this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to make this change and make this change, and then look at it and go, oh my God, I don't know if we can actually even do that, know if we can pull that off. We have to have the combination of Ben Adam, of humans standing up saying, Ben Adam, we are the children of the Adamah, the children of the earth. We no one else can do this but us. And God, our partner, coming in the form of the Shechinah, the divine presence, that is the feminine, that is present, that lives in every single rock, tree, and I know every rock and tree. Living in that consciousness can bring them together and create that change that we're so desperate for right now. But we have to have faith, and we have to believe in it. We have to pray for it, and we have to do the work. And doing the work means all kinds of things. For me personally, this Earth Day, I've been thinking a lot about my consumption. It helps that that I'm not going out anywhere, so I'm not seeing, I want this and I want that. And it also helps that, I don't really have any projected income, so I'm being very conscious of what I spend. But it's a really important time for us to start looking at those things, instead of saying like, all right, well, I can always get another one of those, or I can always get another, of this and of that. It's like, no, this comes from a limited resource. Shefa, which is God's abundance, is unlimited. That's for sure. And, we don't need to be anxious and worried about running out, but we do need to be conscious that if this is divine Shefa and this comes from Hashem, then how careful do I need to be about this amazing gift that I have? In this amazing book, which again, it's like an old book and it's probably out of date, but it's been so helpful to me. There was some really beautiful, not beautiful, it was kind of scary, but there was some really incredible, let's say, some really incredible ways of understanding that everything has a backpack or a rucksack. Like how much ore is required to get the gold for someone's wedding ring, or the metals that are used in your cell phone or your computer. And he talks about like how many tons of things are needed for us to just get what we have in our lives. And it's pretty scary. It's pretty eye-opening and awakening. And it helps me see things as more than just what they are. And I want to say that at a time like now, we're more conscious of that than we've ever been, because we know that in terms of transmission of COVID-19, for example, we know now that when I walk in the street, I actually leave an imprint behind me. Everyone that I meet, there's a transmission that I don't even see. We know that there's a lot more that weighing on us that we carry than we even know. And we know that our current experience is something that will have repercussions for generations. Sometimes we weren't always aware of that, right? Like we would walk down the street and be like, okay, I'm going to throw this out here or toss that there, because, there's always a later, there's always another time. And now we're in a moment where we're like, oh my God, everything that's happening right now is going to impact our economy in the future. It's going to impact, the health of our families. It's going to impact our social systems. We're realizing that as these systems are cracking, it's time that we have to build them better and stronger than they've ever been. And it's highlighting those shortcomings in our world. So we're more conscious and aware than we've ever been before. And that means that we have an amazing opportunity, which means living life not with anxiety and not with fear, but with awareness and with prayer and with alignment, knowing that every single thing that we do to take care of God's earth is a mitzvah, L'Avda L'Shamra, and every single thing we do to take care of our bodies is a mitzvah. There's a great story of Hillel. I mentioned Hillel earlier, but Hillel was walking one day, and his students asked, like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, well, I'm off to take care of, now I can't remember the words of what he said. He said, I'm off to take care of the king, or I'm off to take care of God. And he's like, oh no, oh, thank you, Miriam. I'm like, is someone going to help me out with this one? I have it written here in this story. Anyway, he's like, I have to go see to like a very important matter of like, taking care of the king's orders. And what's he really doing? He's going to have a bath, because he's like, every human being is created b'tselem Elokim, in God's image. And if I take care of my body, then I'm actually taking care of God. And the same with the earth. When we take care of, for some of us, my friend Shosh right now is doing an amazing job planting garden. And I'm going to link to her Instagram in the comments, because I want you all to see what she does. Every single morning, she's like, my squashes have flowers. And this morning she's like, and there's a little bit of baby kale, and my kids came outside and they were like planting cucumbers. And it's just the most amazing thing to witness every day, new growth and new things coming out. They said that seed factories have run out of stock, and now some seed factories are doing only commercial orders, because people are growing their own food. They're like, oh, well, this is the time for us to get back to basics and think about what we can do, A, B, C, D. I can grow my own food. I'm going to do this thing where I like cut a little bit of scallion and see if it grows in a jar of water. Wish me luck. We can be conscious of what we purchase, of what we buy, and how we repurpose what we already have. We can think about our downstream footprint. So for example, I'm a little bit conscious of the fact that recycling, especially plastic recycling in this country, often doesn't necessarily go where we want it to go. And often it can be thrown out and sent to landfill. So I've been thinking a little bit about what can I do with the plastics that come my way to repurpose them, to use them in a different way, to minimize how I use it and what I use, so that I don't keep contributing to that. I think about my compost. Composting in a city is not easy, but when I was living in New York, I used to put it in the freezer and drop it off every other week. And now here in Jerusalem, we have a neighbor, God bless, who we go and drop it off at. None of these things are easy. Thinking about electricity and how much we consume, but these are all sacred. These are all sacred acts. They're sacred acts of allowing the Shechinah to come into the garden, the sacred acts of taking care of the garden that we were given to protect and to take care of, and the sacred acts of ensuring a future for our community, our families, our children, our children's children. In fact, they're a part of messianic consciousness. So, depending on who you tune into on the internet these days, we know that what's happening right now, COVID-19, is a monumental shift. It's a monumental opportunity for people to be more consciously aware of things. It's devastating. A lot of us are in mourning and in grief over the people that we've lost. A lot of us are in fear and uncertainty over the financial and economic possibilities. A lot of us are in overwhelm, mental health crunch and stress over, just the loss of social and environmental freedom. And we also are being forced to take a really good, hard, long look at what's important to us. And that means that we're going to come out of this cocoon, this butterfly chrysalis, caterpillar chrysalis, absolute butterflies. And it doesn't mean that it's always going to be easy or fun, or that it's something that we can be like, I'm so happy I'm in this chrysalis, because we can't deny that there's devastation happening. There's really, really horrible, sad, scary things happening. But we're in a position to change all of that. We're in a position where the governments and the structures and the symbols that have been in power that we've been trusting in have shown that they were not worth what we thought they were. And now it's up to us on the grassroots to build and create the world that we want to live in, and the world we want our families to live in. So we can do the work on both levels. Joanna Macy talks about how there are holding actions and then there are transformational actions. In Chassidut, we call them iskafia and isapcha. Iskafia is about holding back. It's about containing. It's about contracting. It's about refraining. So iskafia, this is to talk about negative energy. So iskafia would be, I'm not going to buy plastic items, or I'm not going to I'm having terrible sorry. I'm going to write a petition to demand that companies stop their emissions, or stop dumping chemicals in certain places. Or, I'm going to be conscious of how much time I use water in the shower, or I'm going to change the electronic, how I use electricity. All of those things are iskafia. They're holding actions. And that applies on a political level. I'm going to send you all, there's an open letter to Congress that Chazan is behind, that I'm signing, and I encourage all of you to sign. And those are all holding actions. Those are all dealing with the status quo and saying, okay, I'm going to just contribute in my own little way to not doing this. And then we have iskafia, ishapcha, which is transformation or transmutation, or what Joanna Macy, who's an ecofeminist, calls transformational actions. And that's rebuilding the whole system. That's saying, forget using less fossil fuels. Let's build a whole new grid of sustainable, renewable electricity. Even better, let's find a way to live in a home where we don't even use fuel in the same way. I mean, please God, we can all get there. I'm not quite there. But let's rethink everything. Let's rethink how we purchase. Let's rethink how we eat. Let's rethink how we travel. Let's rethink how we communicate. All of those things. And let's actually do this transformation from the ground up. We all have that power. I know that every single person who's watching this, and every single person that I'm in contact with, has within them that transcendental, divine, out of this world possibility buried deep within. Sometimes we feel it, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we walk down the street and we think, I can't even get one foot in front of the other, and sometimes we think the sky's the limit. We need to know the sky's the limit. We need to know today is Hod Shebegvura. Today's the day about gratitude for the structures and the containment and that which contains us, and we think it limits us, but it's actually giving us space to fly forward. Every time those things come our way, we can say, thank you for teaching me. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to see what I'm capable of and what the possibility is inside me. I know every single one of us has that possibility and that potential inside us. We come from a rich, rich tradition of connection to the earth, connection to the body, and understanding and awareness of the world around us. We're in a current culture that sold us a bill of goods that we need to sit and We need to pay attention to books. We need to pay attention to screens. We need to just get done what we need to get done in front of us. And that wasn't true. That some of us were lucky and didn't always have to experience that. But we need to remember the truth, which is when we live in a God-conscious way, when we know that there is shefa, there is abundance, that it comes from God, that this planet has the potential and the capacity to heal. I'm not talking about doctored memes from a couple of weeks ago of, we are the virus. I'm talking about the planet. Once we stop doing things to her, she has the ability to heal, and it's already happening. We had the ability to stop everything and change. We all did that just a few weeks ago. I think it was 40 days ago for me. If we have the capacity to do it then, we can have the capacity to keep doing that. We have the capacity to say, do I really need this new gadget? Or does my existing gadget work just as well? Do I really need to buy another plastic tchotchke? Do I really need to keep the lights on? Do I really need to do all these things? And can I think really creatively about a whole new way to live? Can I think really creatively about whole new ways to be living in alignment with the earth? And can I think about a whole new way to teach my children and to teach the people around me that? Can I think about a whole new way to pray in a way that I'm conscious of the earth, that I'm not just sitting, I think one of the most incredible things coming out of this time is people praying outdoors. We're not just sitting on folding chairs, on plastic folding chairs inside air-conditioned rooms doing our prayers, but we're actually outdoors, connecting to nature, even if it's cold, even if it's wet, even if it's windy, connecting to our neighbors, awareness of our environment. As we move into this new awareness, I want to bless us all. I want to bless us all on this important holy day of Yom HaShoah, commemorating those who dedicated their lives, those who lost their lives. The people whose spirit I know is with us now, because we're going through a time of deep, deep change. And I know a lot of us are working through the trauma of survival, the trauma of grief, the trauma of fear, the trauma of plague. And a lot of us are working through that trauma that came from that time period of the Holocaust. And I know that all of those souls are with us now saying, yeah, shake it off. It's done. We're moving into a new time, a new era. We need to have faith. We need to pray, and we need to do the work. So I bless us. I bless the souls of all those who are gone. I bless the souls of those of us who are here. I bless us all that we find the strength within us to say, Lo avda tikvatenu, we have not lost our hope. We will, these bones will live again. This earth will be rejuvenated. This atmosphere will clear up. The earth's crust will heal herself. We will have the most incredible alignment of divine, of upper and lower, of our consciousness and God consciousness being one. We'll know what we're doing when we walk down the street. And the earth will be a dwelling place for the divine, the most beautiful, incredible garden. And we will walk like lovers with one another and like lovers with the divine. So I'm blessing us all on this day that we can walk in the world and do that step by step. Or as I said, I was singing earlier, inch by inch, row by row, gonna make this garden grow. We're actually gonna do this work. And I'm gonna post below here a bunch of resources of the things that I like to read that have been inspiring to me, both in terms of ecofeminism and environmental consciousness, and also in terms of the divine presence on earth. And thank you all for coming on this journey with me. I will admit that this is my first time formally teaching about this. It's something I think about a lot and I talk about a lot, and I haven't formally taught about this, so I'm very welcoming of feedback. If you have any questions, anything you want me to clarify, anything that you want me to go into more detail about next time, I'm more than happy to share. And I just want to say thank you to Chazon for spearheading this, for encouraging me to do this, and for the Sound the Call campaign. Those of you who are watching, make sure that on Wednesday between 11 a.m. and 12 noon EDT, there will be there's a Zoom call, 1,000 people maximum, and it'll be on Facebook Live with people gathering to talk about Earth Day and climate change. And then at noon, they will sound the shofar. I would do that now, but I really can't because it's the middle of the night here in Jerusalem. So I really encourage you all to come and join that and put your name on the letter to Congress and really gather around your community at home, wherever you are, and we all need to do the best we can. We all need to contribute, because together in prayer is how it's going to happen. Lots of blessings and lots of love.